Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Breaking Boundaries with Barbell Apparel. I'm here today with Natan Levy, MMA fighter based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and a fellow lefty like me. So we're really happy to have him on today. Natan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. You're our first MMA fighter on the podcast. You're a Vegas local, and you've had an amazing start to your career. So we're pretty excited to dive in and give our listeners some insight into your background, how you got into MMA, how you trained for it, and what that all looks like. So just to give everyone a little background on Natan, he was born in France, raised in Israel, and started training Kung Fu and Karate at age 15. He received his black belt in Kung Fu at 17 and Karate at 18 in Okinawa, Japan. And at 22, he decided to move to Las Vegas to train and compete in MMA. He's currently training under Jimmy Gifford and Eric Nixick at Team Couture. He's 5'9" and competes lightweight at 155 pounds. He's known for his striking capabilities, but he's finished many of his matches with jiu-jitsu ground submissions. As we've mentioned before, he's left-handed and fights southpaw. He's had 4 wins and 0 losses as an amateur, and won his 6 pro matches, his first pro matches in a row. Match 1, he armbar submissioned in 1 minute and 25 seconds into round 1. And match 2, he won with a guillotine submission in just 29 seconds in round 1. Natan, what an awesome start to your career, man. I'm sure you're pretty stoked about all that.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, it's got to feel good to have made the decision to pursue MMA as a career and then have such awesome success.
Yeah, for me, it's always been about stepping out of the comfort zone. And that was, that's the hardest competition in the world, the hardest sport in the world. So I had to go with my dream and pursue it.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing with MMA is it all boils down to you, right? There's no team, there's no one else to help you. I mean, you have your coaches and stuff in training, but once you step into the ring, it's just you.
Yeah, it's not a team sport, but there is a team. There are, friends, teammates you can rely on. They help you improve, get better. Iron sharpens iron, so you always got to find the right partners for you. But definitely the moment you're in the cage, it's just you and your opponent. You got nobody to blame if you lose, only yourself, and you got only, you're the one to be praised when you win. Again, of course, there's a team around you. Without them, you probably wouldn't win. But at the end of the day, you got to go out and make it happen.
Yeah, and you have been making it happen. Give us a little bit of information on your athletic background. Obviously, you started the karate and kung fu as a teenager, but what did you do before that, like in your younger years? Were you just generally athletic? Did you play any other sports or do anything else?
I never really liked any other sport. So for me, it was martial arts always, martial arts movies, everything. But I was young and I lacked discipline to stick to anything. I would train a little bit of karate and stop, judo, stop, Thai boxing a little bit and stop. And only when I was 15, I was really dedicated enough and wanted to become a better person, better, have self-confidence, use my athletic abilities. And I finally stuck to training. I found something that I was willing to work hard for.
Yeah, I think that's actually kind of cool because I'm sure a lot of people feel like if they don't start things really young, that they might not have the chance or the opportunity to succeed at a high level. And you started, as in your mid-teens, and you're competing with the best in the world now, which is pretty cool. You mentioned that you did do some other martial arts before starting the karate in a more disciplined fashion at 15, like Thai boxing and judo and things like that. What do you think clicked with the karate that made it something that you're like, okay, I can stick with this? Was it just like the maturity that you hit at that age, or was there something about karate specifically that just resonated with you?
We were doing both karate and kung fu, kind of like a mix. But I think for me, the biggest thing was just how hard the training was. I was scared before every session. Like I would have butterflies and I wouldn't know if I'm going to survive training today. I wouldn't want to leave the house, and I would still do it. And I think that was a big part of what pushed me. I really had I had to struggle with myself, and it never got boring. I never felt comfortable. Maybe a little bit earlier, if I would train that hard, I would quit because it's too hard. But it was like the right training at the right time for me. And I found something in me, to push myself from being kind of a lazy teenager and hanging out with sometimes the wrong crowds and stuff like that. I finally found like a reason to give my all to something.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, I think for a lot of our listeners, that's probably something that a lot of people discover about themselves when when they finally find like the one thing that they can pursue is that element of kind of like self challenge. I like how you kind of described it as like almost like nervousness before each training session. Like you don't know how hard it's going to be or if you can even do it, but that's what got you motivated. Like I find that in myself a lot. I think like a lot of people who do CrossFit or powerlifting or anything like that, they tend to really like that element of it where it's like, I don't know if I can do this, but that's kind of what keeps it exciting and keep it fresh. So that's pretty cool. When you were doing that karate kung fu training, what did your typical training sessions look like?
We would come in, warm up. Other than, obviously joints and stuff like that, warm up was consisting of 500 push-ups and 1,000 sit-ups every day. Plus, some other drills and other things, and stretching would be very hard. The instructor would force us into a butterfly and stuff like that. So it was very hardcore. And the training, on the schedule, it said an hour and a half, but we would stay in there for at least 2.5 hours to 3 hours, and just doing forms over and over again, and punching the bag and punching some walls. And then, when you're dead tired, then it's time to punch each other and spar and all that stuff. There weren't any rounds. We would just go until somebody kind of gives up, is too tired or too hurt. So it was challenging for sure.
Yeah, and it sounds like an environment that breeds a bit of toughness, right? I mean, starting the workout with 500 push-ups and 1,000 sit-ups, I think that'd be enough for most people. But then you have to dive into the rest of the training. Those training sessions being 2.5 or 3 hours, were you doing this after school?
Yes, every evening. At first, I was doing it, I think a couple times a week, just as a beginner. Very quickly, the training would be an hour and a half. It would be over. And then the coach would tell me, okay, you can stay with the other guys. Then it'd be, you can come in on the other days of the week. And then I would do beginner training with the beginners and stay for advanced training. So I was, again, training at least 3 hours a day. After about 6 months of practicing, I was already all in.
That's awesome. I've never done karate or had much exposure to it, but that sounds like a pretty hardcore place to come up and get your feet wet with martial arts. Do you know, is all karate like that, or do you think there was something special about your instructor in the dojo you were training at?
Yeah, I think not at all. Like, not all karate is like that. I think a lot of the moves we did, as far as technique goes, and especially for MMA, a lot of it is good. A lot of it is not that good or that practical, but it doesn't matter, because even if the move was not very effective, we'd have to do it 1,000 times and sweat and internally cry, sometimes physically cry while we're training. So it definitely bred us different. Me and my friends who trained there, we're friends to this day. And again, it was very different than any other dojo, and that's, I think, what made me stick to it. Right before that, I was training in another karate place, and it felt very soft and very boring, even though I wasn't that good at it. The moment I went and tried this new gym and found it, then I really fell in love with the art.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a question written down here to ask you how the karate and kung fu translated to MMA, and you kind of touched on it briefly, in the sense that like some of the moves are not that practical for a mixed martial arts environment. But I think what what I'm gleaning from the conversation is that the dojo you were training at, I mean, it sounds like it'd be difficult to go there with any regularity and not come out just like super tough and ready to suffer. So I'm sure that element of just being good at being disciplined, willing to do something, if you're doing push-ups 500 times, you're doing sit-ups 1,000 times every day, you're practicing these moves 1,000 times. I'm sure that those building blocks just kind of helped like craft an athletic background that allowed you to say, hey, when you made the decision to do MMA, you kind of already had like a really strong foundation, and I'm sure you already really fit from all of the karate training as well.
Yeah, I agree.
That's awesome. So, you got your third degree black belt at 22, and then you made the decision to say, hey, I want to pursue MMA full time. What was the process that happened for you personally that made you decide like, hey, I don't want to just do karate. I want to go after MMA and move to Vegas and make this my life?
I would stay up at night and watch UFC. So in Israel, it's opposite time zone. So I'd have to, stay up until 4 a.m. to watch the UFC card. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was awesome. But in my mind, it was, okay, that's one sport. I'm doing something completely different. I wish I could do this, but I'm doing something different, Be like me watching soccer and all of a sudden saying, oh, I want to be a soccer player. Like, it's not what you've been training for. But there were a couple of guys from karate background who did well in the UFC. And that kind of gave me the spark that, maybe I can do this. I knew I would have to learn different things like grappling, wrestling, boxing, but I didn't know how incomplete I truly am. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So only when I got to Vegas, I really understood how big of a task I got in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, being a successful MMA fighter requires such a breadth of knowledge across so many different disciplines. When you first got here to Vegas and started training, what was the first area of MMA that you felt like you really had to dial in and learn?
So at first I met my coach Giff, and we started boxing. It was so different. I thought striking is striking, but the stance was different, the hand placement, the tempo, the shape that I need to be in. It's just different. And even just first training, when he told me to jump rope for 8 minutes, it was something I had never done. So I had done other very hard things, but never jump rope. So it was really hard, and I couldn't walk for a week after that. So yeah, the first thing I really needed to focus on was jiu-jitsu. Because I didn't know how to box yet, but at least I could throw a head kick. I could do some things on the feet. On the ground, I was a fish out of the water. So I started doing jiu-jitsu twice a day on top of my MMA training. So I would do morning 10 a.m. jiu-jitsu, then 11:30 I would do MMA, finish at 1:30 I would do boxing, and then finish. Sometimes I would do strength conditioning, and then nighttime I would do jiu-jitsu again. That was my schedule for months until my visa would expire and I'd have to go back to Israel, work for 6 months, save as much as possible, fly to Vegas again, do it all over again. And that's what I did for about 3 years before I got my first amateur fight.
Yeah, so you worked really hard to make that happen, both physically and from a financial perspective, having to go back to Israel to earn money to make this all happen. I mean, you're packing a lot of sessions into that day of training. How many days a week would you do that?
5 days a week, and on Saturday we would do like run hills at the park and spar.
So 6 days a week. Would you take Sundays off?
Yes. Sometimes I would go World Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, you seem like the kind of guy who doesn't like to take an off day. The component of having to go back to Israel and work for 6 months at a time, were you doing anything while you were there in Israel to kind of like stay on top of your skills and stay fresh?
It was difficult. I would still do some karate in Israel. And at first, I didn't have any connections to any gyms or anything. Also, the sport in Israel was not very developed. But over time, it got better. I made some connections. Obviously, there's some good coaches as far as jiu-jitsu goes and boxing. And slowly, I found my people to practice these styles in Israel. So slowly, I got there, but it took some time.
Definitely. And you said you spent 3 years doing that before you got your first amateur fight. While you were doing that, I'm assuming part of you enjoyed it, or you might not have been able to grind it out. But I'm sure, did part of you believe that you were going to make it happen, that you were going to get these amateur fights and eventually, hopefully, go pro?
Part of me believed, but it got very discouraging at some point because I would do all the training and I would want to fight. At first, my coach told me, "You're not ready." Then went home, came again, second time, "You're not ready." Okay, fly back home, third time, "Let's get you an amateur fight. But let's get it for the end of your 3 months visa so you can train for 3 months, be even more ready, be in great shape, and fight." Then that fight fell through. So I flew home, no fight. And every time I go back home, everybody's like, "So what happened? Didn't you go to Vegas to fight? Why didn't you fight?" Maybe they think I'm scared or I'm not really going to do it. Fourth time, I had, I think, 8 fights canceled. And only the 10th fight that ever got scheduled actually happened. And that was my first amateur fight.
I'm sure there was a combination of relief of actually having that fight happen and being scheduled after working so hard for so long. But also, here you are, and now you have to actually fight for the first time when stuff's on the line. So how did that feel? Knowing that, hey, now I have a real fight and I have to make this happen.
Yeah, the pressure was pretty big. And, going through all this, all the traveling, the financial issues, the hard work, everything, and then stepping in there and you finally see the cage. I thought I was, at some point I thought this is just not going to happen for me. There were many times when I thought, I guess this is just not for me. Somebody, God, I don't know, somebody doesn't want me to fight. And then you finally see the cage and you're about to step in for the first time. Now, it's my first time competing at anything. I never competed in karate. I never did anything. It's my first sport is an MMA fight in front of 20,000 people. Then to go in there and finish my opponent in I think 50 seconds or something with a choke, that was incredible. To this day, I think this is the best moment of my career. It gives me chills just to think about it.
Yeah, it gives me chills just you talking about it. That's pretty cool. So you mentioned you never competed before. So to step into the ring where someone else is trying to beat you and you're in front of 20,000 people and you're doing this for the first time, how did you control your nerves to be able to perform at a high level under such pressure? Was it just all of the practice and repetition you had put in to where this was kind of muscle memory, or was there anything else going on that helped you do that?
The nerves are there. You can't really fight it. I would say don't get nervous from being nervous. Don't, "Oh, I'm nervous." Yeah, you're going to be nervous. But the moment it's time to act, there are no nerves. It's all the instinct. Either did you train or did you not train for it? If you train for it, then you're going to be okay. Trust your instincts. In a fight, there's no time to think. You can't calculate things. You can't think, "Oh, he's punching me with his right hand, so I'm going to block and counter." There is no time. By the time I thought that, I already got punched 3 times. So you just got to act. And then there's no room for nerves. You can't think, you just go. And, they say you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall back to the level of your training.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then, I mean, you have a crazy training schedule leading up to this fight, and you have the fight itself, all of which put like tons of strain on your body, and you're able to do this for months on end. How seriously or how much thought or effort do you put into your recovery, your sleep, things like that?
Back then I was younger, so not too much. Like I said, Sunday I would go and roll instead of resting. For me, just doing one session and doing jiu-jitsu, which is like maybe the lightest on the body, felt like a rest day. Nowadays, I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and I don't train 6 times a day. I train 2 to 3 times a day, which is also a lot, but for me, it's like listening to my body. If I feel like 3 is going to break me, I'd rather do 2 and choose quality over quantity. But of course, the recovery is very important. Sleep is like, performance enhancing drug. That's sleep. You don't need to take anything from outside. You just need to put your head on the pillow and go to sleep. Nutrition is super important. Physical therapy, massages, it's a lot of things that I would never do. And now I can't live without them.
So after a fight, I'm like assuming it's probably a different recovery process depending on how deep the fight goes and how strenuous it is. I mean, you have several wins where you've submitted the guy in the first round, but you also have wins where you've gone the distance and gone down to decision. For those longer fights, how hard is it to recover from them?
It is hard. At first, when you win those quick fights, a lot of times I would be back in the gym the next day. And the thing is, in your mind, you say, I didn't break a sweat in the fight. I don't need to rest. But what you need to rest from is the fight camp. Your body goes through a lot and you got to give your body something back. You can't just take and take and take. You got to give a little bit. So my coaches would force me to take a week off after a fight. And nowadays, the fights are way harder. The level is higher. It's a lot harder to finish opponents. And then you got to kick them for 15 minutes and punch them, and your hands and feet, hurt. Sometimes your face too. So you got to take at least a week, 10 days to recover and then slowly build back up. Because, you peak, and when you're done peaking, you go down. So you want to peak the day of the fight, and then it's natural. You can't just peak and go up and up, up. So you got to give your body some downtime.
Yeah, sounds like you've had smart coaches too, which I'm sure has helped contribute to your success and your rapid development as an MMA fighter. So you had your first amateur win, and we talked a little bit about that. Like, what an amazing feeling! And then, how long was it until you got your next fight?
Real quick, I think 3 weeks.
And then you kept winning after that. You won all of your amateur fights. That had to be just like an incredible feeling of validation that all this time and money and energy you had spent pursuing an MMA career had been worth it.
Yes, it was, it is. And it changed my life.
Yeah, and then you had the opportunity to go pro. I mean, what did that feel like? I'm sure getting your first amateur fight was one thing, but being able to go pro had to be something completely different.
Yeah, I when it was hard to get the amateur fights, me and my coach once spoke, and he said I had already started karate late, right? I had started the MMA at 22, and I was 24. I haven't competed yet. And my coach told me, look, if we don't get you a fight by 26, you just go pro. With fights, without fights, I don't care. 26, you're fighting pro. And so I did get my first amateur fight when I was 24. And I fought 4 fights in a year. And then I broke my hand in my last fight. And they wanted to give me like an amateur world title shot. But I broke my hand and I was out for a year, and I turned 26 in that year. And then, like my coach said, 26 is pro. So we went pro.
Did you feel like you were ready for it?
I did. I felt like my last amateur performance, I would look at it and think like what I'm seeing is a pro fighter. But of course, also I had this voice in my head telling me, "Hey, maybe you're not ready. Maybe talk to coach about getting one more amateur fight." Uh, I did tell him maybe we do one more for the title and then I can have the belt. And he said, "You don't need that. It's a waste of time. You're turning pro." I said, "Okay, coach."
Yeah, props to your coach for being a source of strong advice, and props to you for listening to him. And then so you start fighting pro, and you keep winning again. You won your first 6 fights. I mean, did you expect to keep winning? Obviously, you go in with the goal to win, but to win one after another, I mean, that had to just be an incredible momentum you were gaining there.
Yeah, it was incredible. And, I always knew like someday I'd lose, but not today. And, at first, like same like in the amateur, at first you fight, you turn pro, you level up, you've been training for longer, and your opponents are good, but not as good as you are. And then you can finish them more quickly. And then slowly the competition gets tougher. You start meeting other undefeated fighters, and it gets, every fight is higher level, higher stakes, more pressure, more training, and just that's how it is.
Yeah, and I'm sure as you're advancing in your pro MMA career and fighting higher caliber opponents, how much of your training shifted towards preparing to those opponents specifically?
Yeah, the thing with when I was training, a few sessions a day, like 5 sessions a day, like we spoke. So my biggest thing would be I'm new in this sport, and I want to learn as much as possible. Maybe my last session I'm going to be dead tired, but I'm going to be in the room to learn that technique. I don't care if I get slaughtered when we spar or whatever. I was in the room to learn the techniques and drill them. Or maybe sometimes I'd be smart enough to say, "Hey, you know what? Today I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to drill and rest." Then, with time, I did gain, I feel like, a lot of MMA knowledge. And I still have a lot to learn, and I'm always learning. But when you get a fight now, it's no longer about let me learn as much techniques as possible. It's about how do I win this fight? Where is my opponent strong? Where is he weak? Where can he take advantage of me? Where can I take advantage of him and find his holes? So fight camp is like training to get in great shape and to beat your opponent. It's not about just being generally better. That's more for like off season.
Yeah. So, I mean, especially as things, become more high pressure, like it seems like the specificity of your training increases. And I mean, you've done this all in like a pretty rapid time frame in the grand scheme of how people train for professional athletic careers. Like basically starting when you're 22 and having to build that entire foundation of even how to play the game, and then getting, drilled down to the specificity of winning a singular professional match. And so, I mean, you've obviously executed amazingly. You won your first 6 matches, and then eventually you did have your first loss. You said you expected that you would lose at some point, but not today. I like that phrasing. But still, like, I'm sure that losing a match has to have its own string of emotions that comes with it. And you've already been past that. That was like about a year ago now, right? And you've won again since then. So obviously you're able to overcome it, come back, fight stronger, and win another match. Talk a little bit about the process of losing, mentally framing that, and being able to come back stronger and keep winning.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I think it was my UFC debut, and I was undefeated as a pro and as an amateur. I felt like I was I was very confident that I was going to win this fight, and I felt like, sometimes, like I think every athlete, I had doubts about myself, about how far I can get, how good am I. Sometimes I would think, what if I meet this kind of opponent? Would I be able to beat him? And this was one of the first fights that I was that confident that I was going to win. And I was like, you know what? Stop doubting yourself. Like, this is a good matchup for you. You should win this, and you're going to win it. And I didn't, which was a big blow for my confidence, for my motivation, for like the hunger to continue in the sport. I really felt the blow. And I really love training. I love martial arts. I love almost everything about the sport. It's like my passion. I think about it day and night. But it really made me think twice if I want to continue. And especially after all these hardships, and I had my moments of all the overcoming everything. But then every fight, like I said, the stakes are higher, and every fight is like, this is the one, this is it. Everything's on the line. And in the last fight, the biggest fight, then I lose. I was shot as far as like, I was zapped, I didn't have energy. I didn't know if I want to continue. But I said, quitting is not for me. And if I'm going to take another fight, of course. And at first, same thing. I didn't know if I could win this fight, but I put it in my head that I will, and I did everything I could to win it, and I did.
Yeah, what a great story. And I mean, I really appreciate the humanity of it all, like talking about it from a very real perspective of the emotions you've experienced, because I think that like most of us who have pursued something or wanted something really aggressively and failed, that we've all experienced similar things. And so hearing that you went through something similar with the loss and were able to just push past it and overcome it and come back and win is pretty awesome. It kind of brings me to another question I want to ask is like, you have this really aggressive training schedule, even if it's dialed back a bit since your most aggressive days, and you're fighting. And especially when you were coming up, you had to go back to Israel and work. And it sounds like you're just kind of really good at staying disciplined. Even when you talked about your loss, you're like, hey, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but you decided quitting wasn't for you and that you were going to just keep at it. How often do you kind of like feel like, hey, I'm not feeling that motivated right now, but I'm going to do this anyways?
Yeah, I always say motivation is for kids. I have discipline. Like most days, I'm motivated. I want to train. I enjoy training. It's fun. I enjoy the challenge. Some days I wake up, my feet hurt just from stepping on the floor, from waking up, like getting out of bed. My back hurts. I don't want to train. I don't feel like doing this, but I still go out and do it. Like, it doesn't matter if I feel like it or I don't feel like it. Motivation is nice, it's fun. If I watch Rocky, then I'm going to have some motivation maybe the next day. If I think about, some things that are important to me, I have motivation. That's great, but I don't need one. I do what I got to do.
Motivation is for kids. I have discipline. I love that. I'm going to print it on a t-shirt. So you have another match coming up in about a month, huh?
Yep.
Yeah. What are you doing to prepare for that currently?
Training hard, very hard. It's going to be my opponent is very aggressive, and he puts on a, very high output and intensity. And I don't intend on being behind. I'm going to meet him with the same intensity. and we're gonna see who breaks first. I think it's gonna be fight of the night for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're super excited to watch it, and you'll have a lot of people at Barbell Apparel and of our customers and followers cheering for you. I mean, keep at it, man, and we're rooting for you for sure. So I'm sure right now you're mostly focused on the next fight. Is that kind of how you approach your MMA as a career as a whole? Are you just thinking about the next fight, or do you ever think further into the future?
I like to have a game plan of like a roadmap, and I've had it since day one. My roadmap has been, train, get better at this, do amateur fights, by 26 turn pro, win so and so many fights at pro, get a UFC, sign with the UFC. I always had a roadmap, but sometimes things change, so you gotta adapt. You can't be like too stubborn with your roadmap. It's gotta be flexible. So I like to have like the big picture, but as far as my focus, it's always on just the next step. There's stairs or a ladder. I just gotta climb, one stair up. If I don't do it, if I look somewhere else, I might fall down the whole staircase. So it's one step at a time. I know where I'm going, but I gotta focus on the next step.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. For our listeners, if anyone listening wanted to get started in MMA, wanted to start training for it, do you have any general tips? Where should they get started?
I think as far as just training, I think it's a lot of fun. It's great, to stay fit and, have self-defense capabilities and all that stuff. It's amazing. I would say start with one style, maybe jiu-jitsu or boxing or kickboxing or wrestling, but one thing, get decent at it, get pretty good at it, put a lot of energy in it. If you can't do that, if you can train like very hard in one discipline, then don't think about, spreading to 5 different disciplines. Then maybe it's not for you. And I think a lot of people like fighting, but they don't understand the sacrifices a professional career requires. So whenever people write me, "Hey man, I'm thinking about being an MMA fighter," if you're thinking about it, maybe think about doing it for fun and do something else with your life. If you have a burning desire to do it no matter what, and you're not asking for permission from anybody, especially not me on Instagram, then go ahead and do it.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, even you've had to sacrifice so much and put so much hard work into it, and sacrifice in ways that many people probably wouldn't be willing to do. I mean, just outside of the mental dedication you've had to give to it with work and travel and the years of sacrifice. I mean, it sounds like the physical toll it takes on your body, even just the training, is pretty immense. So I can imagine that if you didn't have like that deep passion for it you're talking about, people would burn out pretty fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know, like, for me, I have athletic stuff that I do that I take very seriously. But I'm both not talented enough, and probably not motivated enough to ever have done it professionally. So, like, it's okay. Not everyone has to be a pro. But for people like you that do make that decision and go that extra mile, I think it can be really inspirational for the rest of us. So, I mean, thank you for taking the time to chat today, and we'll all be rooting for you in this upcoming fight. I'm sure you have plenty of training to get to, and if you're not busy training, you probably need to get some rest in. But if our listeners want to follow along and watch your progress and see what you're up to, where should they follow you at?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. They can follow me at Natan_Levy, NATAN_LEVY, on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook as well. They can look me up, and YouTube.
Yeah, and for everyone listening, we'll put all of his social handles in the show notes. But Barbell Apparel's based out of Las Vegas. Natan has been awesome to work with. So everyone cheer for him in the next fight. Be sure to follow him. He's an inspirational guy, and we really appreciate you having here today. Good luck in your next fight, and we hope to connect with you again soon. We'll have you back on the podcast.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.